The indigenous Osage Nation was the wealthiest people in America in the early 20th century. White men arrived in Oklahoma to guard their wealth, but businessman William King Hale hired a gang of criminals to murder the Osage to seize control of their profits. Ernest Burkhart, Hale's nephew, marries Molly Kyle to profit from her wealth. Molly's three sisters, Anna, Minnie, and Rita, as well as Molly's first husband Henry and several other wealthy Osage, are all killed. Today, I'm going to explain 2023 history drama movie named Killers of the Flower Moon. Spoiled ahead. Watch out. The film begins with an Osage tribe performing a ceremony to bury a peace pipe. They lament the fact that the white man has arrived on their land and that their descendants will be forced to leave. A few moments later, a group of men discover an oil deposit. Text and video evidence show that the Osage became the wealthiest people in the country, and it was only a matter of time before others tried to cash in on their profits. After World War I, Ernest Burkhart arrives in Oklahoma's Osage Nation. He visits his uncle, William King Hale, an influential figure in the community who has amassed his own wealth through businesses and his position as a reserve deputy sheriff. Byron, Ernest's brother, also lives nearby. Hale informs Ernest of the Osage's wealth and how he must seize the opportunity to profit from it. Several Osage members have been murdered in the area, but no investigations have been conducted. The perpetrators are men who work for Hale and are attempting to seize control of their wealth. Molly Kyle lives in town with her mother, Lizzie Q, and her sisters, Anna Brown, Rita, and Minnie. She meets Ernest when he gets a job as a cab driver and starts driving her around. Ernest falls in love with Molly and eventually marries her. Hale notices Minnie looking sad during the wedding and approaches her. Minnie later dies from a wasting disease that affects some Osage. Lizzie is shown to prefer Anna over the rest of her daughters, even though Anna is a dysfunctional alcoholic who keeps a gun in her purse. Lizzie tells Molly at Minnie's funeral that she saw an owl fly into her room, which is supposed to be an omen of death. Anna is found murdered days later after being shot in the head. The doctors in town dismember Anna's body to find the bullet, according to legend. Blackie Thompson, Henry Grammer, Kelsey Morrison, and A.C. Kirby are among the criminals employed by Hale to carry out the murders. Molly consults with a private investigator, William J. Burns, but Hale dispatches Ernest and Byron to assault him to get him off their backs. Ernest also engages in criminal activity, such as gambling with stolen Osage victims' jewelry. Meanwhile, Ernest and Molly have 3 children, Cowboy, Elizabeth, and a baby named Anna. The murders and how to respond are discussed by an Osage council. Their current situation is compared to the same state race riots in Tulsa. Molly begins to suffer from wasting disease, which is exacerbated by Ernest's decision to drug her by putting a toxin in her insulin for her diabetes. Baby Anna develops a cough and is taken to the doctor, despite Molly's refusal to see traditional doctors. Henry Roan, Molly's first husband before Ernest, is seen around town drinking and lamenting his mistakes, resigning himself to an early death. One of Hale's men drives him almost out of town before clumsily shooting him in the back of the head to make it look like a suicide. Hale then beats Ernest for the botched killing because it now clearly appears to be a murder. Charlie Whitehorn, another local, is discovered dead in a small pool of oil. Lizzie becomes ill, and Molly and Rita remain by her side as she dies. Lizzie appears to see elder Osage people guiding her to the afterlife in her final moments. An explosion later wakes everyone up while Ernest and Molly are sleeping. It was delivered to Rita's home, which she shares with her husband, Bill Smith. Ernest goes to investigate and discovers Bill pleading to be killed due to his injuries, while Rita is dead with the back of her head blown out. Ernest returns home to inform Molly that Rita did not survive, causing her to wail in agony. Molly's health deteriorates, and she experiences hallucinations and even sees the same owl that her mother did. Despite her health, Molly travels to Washington, D.C. to personally speak with President Calvin Coolidge for a proper investigation into the murders to be conducted. Tom White, an agent with the Bureau of Investigation, later pays Ernest a visit to question him about the town's murders. White also speaks with Hale, who tries to act innocent and deny knowledge of the killings. Hale begins to try to cover his tracks by assassinating some of his men. His efforts are futile, as White discovers the truth and arrests Ernest and Hale. Molly's health deteriorates to the point where the agents must intervene and provide her with proper medical care, allowing her to heal and return to normal health. Ernest eventually takes some of the toxin for himself and suffers the consequences while being interrogated. W.S. Hamilton, Hale's attorney, tries to persuade Ernest to claim that he was beaten and tortured so that he cannot testify, threatening him and his family if he does not comply. He even tells Molly about these lies. Baby Anna succumbs to whooping cough. Ernest learns the news from White, which breaks him and eventually causes him to turn against Hale and decide to testify against him. During the trial, Ernest tells prosecutor Leawood, John Lithgow, that his uncle forced him to commit crimes against the Osage, specifically Molly and her family, for them to profit from her wealth. When Leawood asks Ernest if Hale ordered him to marry Molly to get closer to her, Ernest says he fell in love with her and married her for that reason. Molly later speaks with Ernest privately and asks if he has told the whole truth. When she asks what he was injecting into her, Ernest lies again, claiming it was just insulin. Molly finally abandons him. The film then cuts to a radio show that has been portraying the events of the film, with an epilogue of what happened to everyone involved. Hale was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, but he and Byron were eventually granted parole on the condition that Hale never returned to Oklahoma, even though some eyewitnesses claimed to have seen him visit his family. The show's producer appears to read Molly's obituary, as she had divorced Ernest and married again before dying at the age of 50 and being buried alongside the rest of her deceased family. The murders were never mentioned either. The final scene depicts a modern-day Osage drum ceremony, with the Osage gathered, singing and dancing, and still thriving.